Have you ever thought of playing strong bullet chess? Did you think of beating up one of the best guys and title guys getting famous in bullet chess? Well, I'm here. I've been thinking about this video for a long time. I want to share some secrets and also very nice, interesting thoughts, but also variations with you. But before we go with that, please share this video, subscribe, and like it because we're going to make more of this kind of videos in the future. Let's immediately get to the point. So, when you play d4, lots of guys against you might go with g6. And then a very famous trick that I did against Nakamura like 15 years ago was bishop h6. What's the point of this? You know that it's bullet game, that he's got a 1 minute only for the whole game, and that he's going to pre-move. And you actually count on his pre-move bishop g7, then you win the bishop and you win the rook. But you gotta be honest. This is absolutely cheap, very risky, and if your opponent simply catch your trick and simply takes the bishop, then you're easily lost because you just gave up a piece. So this video, it's not gonna be about these kinds of things, but actually I'm gonna give you tricky, very, very interesting, but at the same time, sound variations. It's gonna work on all kinds of levels, and you can really enjoy and have great results with it. What I want to tell you, I have more from 75 to 90% with the following lines. Let's begin with the Sicilian defense and 3 options there. For example, when you play Sicilian, you play e4, they go Sicilian. For this bullet skills, you gotta go with knight f3. And now they have 3 options. They have e6, knight c6, and d6. When they go with e6, guys, do you believe I played it in more than 400 games? And after you play d4, they all take on d4. And now you just play bishop g5. You gotta assume that most of these guys are just going to pre-move either a6 or knight c6. Why? Because they all expect of you that you're going to take by knight. And then, if they go with knight c6, it's time, Manov. If they go with a6, then it's can opening. But you go with a bishop g5 and count on their pre-move. You count that they're going to go with a6 or knight c6. Don't worry. It worked. I played it 400 games. It worked fantastic 85%. It's crazy. And when you play bishop g5, now I got to show what's happening. We both know what's going to happen if they go knight c6 or a6. You're going to win the queen. But what happens if your opponent simply goes with bishop e7 and somehow says, nobody, you won't be able to take my queen away? Then you didn't risk by sacrificing a knight, by sacrificing a bishop, not to mention rook and queen. You just go with bishop takes e7, take by queen, and stick your queen on d6, which pretty much crams their position and it doesn't allow them to develop their pieces logically afterwards. For example, if queen b6, today I played a bullet game against the 2600 guy. I easily won. He played one of the most logical and best moves. I just captured by queen. And when he captured by queen, I took by knight. Now I'm threatening very dangerous knight b5. And if that happens, knight c7 is going to be mate. What a nice, lovely mating net. They gotta go with a6, and you just go with knight d2. With knight d2, I want to go knight c4 and knight b6 using another type of trick, going after potentially weak rook on a8 and bishop on c8, but basically you go after the weak dark squares. What a lovely variation. On top of all that, engines like white's position, and you don't risk anything, but you actually use some tricks out of the opening. And finally, lots of guys play f6, which basically means that they weaken these squares around the king. They cannot go with knight f6 anymore. You just go all the way back to c1, and now you want to take on d4, and when they defend it, you play c3. I found that I played more than 200 games only, for example, this variation, and I smash them in most of these games. That when I say most of them, most and more than 75%. What is so nice about this? It reminds me of Smith-Morra. Then you just go with the bishop c4, queen d5, or simply you go bishop c4, queen e2, short castle, and place the rook on d1. In case of knight c6, I have another specialty for you. You go d4, c takes, knight takes. They believe you're going to pre-move something like knight c3, but you actually go with e5 here. And what is so special about e5? You sack, this time you sack pawn. Those who don't see it, they're going to pre-move either a6, d6, g6, or e6. So this move wins against these 4 moves. But in case they see and they play the best move, knight e5, it's not the end of the world. I played it a couple of times. You just go c4, you just go knight c3, and afterwards you just play, for example, bishop here, bishop e2, and when they go with, for example, bishop e7, castles, knight c3, d6, h3, what do you have? Yes, you're down a pawn, but it's not the end of the world. At least you haven't opened E and D files. You just have to place your bishop on E3, play queen C2, place your rooks either on C1 and D1 or on D1 and E1, and it's gonna be fine. One of you might say, but Maya, why do we go with D4, C takes, and now we go with this one? Why don't we go with E5? Simply, there are so many options where they simply don't have to go with the knight f6. But if you like, you can also pre-move e5 and count on his move knight f6 and take the knight for nothing. And third option is when you play knight f3 and they go d6. Here I got a very nice specialty. I fell for like tens, not dozens of times, probably 100 games. At least I was lost. I didn't lose all my games. They go d4, or we go d4, and when they take, they all know that when we take by knight, they should play knight f6, knight c3, and go into the main line. But the problem is, we're not going to take by knight. We'll play e5. And that's such a high. Of course it's dirty. Of course it's cheap. But at the same time, it's absolutely effective move. Because most of these guys are going to place the knight on f6. And then you just take the knight. Funnily enough, I lost some games when I won the knight like this, but all you have to do is just take the knight and play bishop b5. The more you exchange, the easier game you should be having afterwards. Problem is, when you play e5, what happens when they play d takes e5? You certainly cannot take by knight because of check, and then you lose the knight. But here, I have a specialty of mine, thanks to which I won so many games. You play c3, you're down 2 pawns at the moment, but with c3, you're just breaking the center. They can't take, because you take on e5, or take on c3, but I would first take on e5 because I'm threatening this check. They can't make castle, they have weak king. When they play bishop e6, you go knight c3, and now at least you have a nice compensation for the given material, since the king is exposed to our attacks. And if c3, they just go with knight c6. Specialty is bishop b5, because you're just playing against this shaky pawns in the center. You want to take by knight on e5, and when they go with the bishop g4, you go knight bd2. An idea of knight bd2 is when you play b takes, and play e4. It's just one of moves to go with the queen a4, and then they have problems with e5 and c6. Most of these guys that I played against think that after e4 I'm almost lost. It's not gonna happen this time, buddy. I play queen a4, pinning your pawn on e4, bishop on g4, king on e8, knight on c6. What a lovely variation, you have to admit. Then I want to show you something, for example, against Scandinavian. Against Scandinavian, you of course take, they take by queen, and you play knight c3. Most of these guys just place their queen on a5. And here you use the Leonhard Gambit. You can find the video on the channel, but cool one and the real one about the b4 when they play and when they accept the Leonhard Gambit with b4. But unlike the video where I gave the best lines, rook b1, knight f3, d4, bishop c4, how Nakamura won a couple of games in a really beautiful style, here I go with a special bullet approach. You just go with the knight on b5. Today I played a bullet game, and I played 3 tricky lines and won 3 easy games. So actually, that kind of forced me and gave me an idea to make you this video. I've been thinking about creating some special video for the bullet chess and skills, and I believe you're gonna like this one. After knight b5, you threaten to take the pawn on c7. They go queen a5, and then all of a sudden they say, what is this guy doing? Playing bishop c4 and threatening nothing. So when they play c6, His Majesty bishop f7. Why? When they take on f7, you give check, and take a look at this one. Knight is gonna give check on d6 afterwards, followed by queen takes a5, and you win the queen. So if you can't imagine, if they go with g6, you just go with the knight d6 and you win the queen. If they go with king f6, then you're gonna get mated, because still you can't go with this one. I'll go with the knight d4 and you'll lose the queen, or you're gonna get under the check. And once again, I have to show you the correct way of playing. When you play bishop c4, absolutely the best line for black is knight f6. But here, you shouldn't panic. Just go with the bishop on b2. That's what I did yesterday. Place the rook on open file, rook b1. Play queen e2 and knight f3, controlling e5, threatening even bishop e5, going after the c7 pawn in some circumstances. And afterwards, go with the short castle. You absolutely have a full compensation for the bullet chess. Then you know my pattern after e5. Funnily enough, I made more than 5,000 games with the queen h5, so-called Patzer's opening or wayward queen attack. I showed this stats to a Serbian champion, Grandmaster Velimir Ivic, and he couldn't believe his eyes about my stats with the white pieces. Almost 80% with white pieces with the queen h5. Why? Simply, you know, if they go with g6, queen takes e5 and you win the rook. Another thing is there is no more bon cloud, so they can't treat you like a patzer because that's the fastest mate in chess, right? Checkmate. If they go with knight c6, playing correctly, then you can check my famous video against that FM that got more than like 250,000 views, and where I just played bishop c4. The guy played g6. I brought a queen back to f3, threatening mate still. And when they go knight f6, I just go knight e2, and my plan is well known. So I just go with knight c3, I just go with d3, and I want to go with bishop g5 followed by knight d5. I am not afraid if you go with any bishop e6. I just go with castles, and when you take, I open the d file, I go with the knight d5, I'm threatening c5, I'm threatening that, and you just have lots of problems. If you don't take it, but go with h6, I bring the bishop all the way back, and here all of them think that bishop e6 solves all the problems, but it doesn't. Now you take, and you win one of these 2 pawns. It's not too much, but it's still something to win and to have a nice and tricky position afterwards, being up a pawn. Also, for example, on d6, I have a couple of tricky variations, but I especially like d4, knight f6, knight c3, g6, and you can assume that they will pre-move bishop g7. No, I'm not going to suggest you to play bishop h6, because if they take the bishop, then you're lost. I'm going to suggest 2 easy things. Mad Dog, you have it on the channel, with bishop c4, queen e2, and then you just break with e5, and followed by e6, and followed by h4, h5. And you attack the king, or you just go with a semi-dirty e5, semi-dirty because if they pre-move, you win the knight. If they take, not the end of the world, you don't even break the castle since you take by knight, and you can play the game afterwards. What I'm showing you here is just to try it out in a game or 2 and see if it works. If it works, you're gonna say, thanks Maya, this really looks good. And for example, Caro-Kann. Not a big deal. You just go with knight c3, and I like 2 knights. What I like about two knights, that automatically, like an autopilot, they just take on e4 and play knight f6. For all of you weaker guys, go for the Chinese specialty with queen e2. And here, you go for a top theoretical line, but at the same time, you just go with some tricks. So if they go knight b7, boom, knight e6, smothered mate. Take a look at this one. If they don't go with this, but they take on e4, you take by queen, they play knight d7, you play bishop c4 threatening f7, they go knight f6, and you go knight e5. They cannot take the queen because you made them, and when they play e6, you go queen e2. Queen on e2, all together with the knight and bishop on c4, does a great job. They can't play knight d7 because of knight f7 and you win. And if they play anything else, you just go castle, you just go c3 followed by d4, and afterwards you go bishop g5, rook a d1, rook f2 e1, even bring the bishop back if needed, and then you just launch the attack. Finally, if they just go, for example, with Alekhine's defense, you can just go with e5, d4, bishop c4, Balog's variation. What is so special about this one? You have a very nice queen h5 trick once again. You threaten to deliver checkmate. They can play g6 because of queen takes e5 and threatening rook and spoiling everything. And when they play like this, you play d takes e5. They don't have knight around the king, which means that when they play the most logical things like this, you're just gonna kill them and you're just gonna easily win the game when you play knight g5 or bishop g5, placing the rook on d1, well, this rook can go into the action onto the fourth rank and on the king side. I just tried to give you some very nice, smooth, and at the same time tricky systems. Also, I included like a couple of very cheap but sound tricks. And probably if I have to choose at the end of this lecture, the one that works the most for me and that gave me the biggest number of wins, then I definitely go with Sicilian. And when we go with Sicilian, e4, c5, knight f3, e6, don't forget, when you play d4, they all assume you're going to take by knight. But no, you play bishop g5, and then you just threaten the queen. I was told about this move by my good friend, Grandmaster Sholak from Turkey, and he once showed it to me, and ever since then, I won most of my games with the bishop g5. Hope that you enjoyed the video and hope that we're gonna actually give me your feedback about this one and tell me how did you like the previous video. Thanks so much and all the best, guys. Merry Christmas.